So now that it's been confirmed that Joe Locke is indeed Wiccan, everybody's asking the obvious question, when will Speed show up? And now Jacques Schaefer, showrunner for Agatha All Along, has chimed in, giving us some big hints, and basically given us an answer. Let's dive in, talk about what he had to say, what's going on with Agatha All Along, and when I think Billy Maximoff's brother will eventually show up. Now, this week's episode of Agatha All Along really pulled back the curtain on the character Teen. Now, we had suspected for a long time that Joe Locke was playing Billy Kaplan, aka Billy Maximoff. And if you haven't seen this week's episode, we're going to run into some spoilers, so I'm going to give you just a second to click away. Now, we found out in this week's Agatha All Along that Billy Kaplan actually dies in a car accident when the hex around Westview was coming down, and this allowed the spirit of Billy Maximoff to inhabit his body and basically resurrect the character. Now, recently, both the showrunner and Joe Locke sat down with Variety, and they talked a lot about the show. They dove into the origin story, which honestly in the comics is rather convoluted and hard to follow, talking about simplifying the process for Wiccan's past, how difficult it was for Joe Locke, who isn't Jewish, to get through those bar mitzvah scenes and how much he stressed getting that absolutely right, and even a little bit about the return of Evan Peters as Ralph Boner. But I think the most important detail that they talked about was the potential for Billy's brother, Tommy, to make an appearance in the show. Now, as many of you know, Billy's brother is the character known as Speed, and his power set was absolutely teased in the WandaVision series, particularly during that Halloween episode. Now, the first thing Billy said when he came back to life in this week's episode was his missing brother's name, and we found out by the end that's why he was on the Witch's Road. Now, the character of Speed is a big part of the Young Avengers, and at this point it seems like we're about to put the final piece of that team on the playing board. We already have Stature, Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, Young Loki, Ironheart, and now Wiccan and Speed. Now, this question came up during that Variety interview, and the team over at Variety flat out asked Joe Locke if his brother was going to show up by the end of the season. Now, Joe Locke said, "I can't answer that." And then Schaefer chimed in and said, "I know the answer, but I can't tell you. There are still a few secrets in there. It's just exciting to finally be able to level with the audience that his desire is a reunion with his brother." Now, quite honestly, guys, this is a revealing answer, because there is something to know, and the goal has been all along for him to reunite with his brother. There's going to be a payoff at the end of the season. And if you remember correctly, both Billy and Tommy were held hostage by Agatha at the end of WandaVision. And now that we know Billy remembers everything, I'm pretty sure Tommy will too, and this show is going to end up with the twins faced off with Agatha, finding their way out of the Witch's Road, and finally becoming a full part of the MCU. Now, Makari was a speedster in Eternals, but we only got that one instant, and Quicksilver didn't make it out of Age of Ultron. So the MCU has a huge space for a speed-oriented character, and we know the Avengers, including the Young Avengers, are the franchise that Bob Iger wants to expand. So adding Speed to the mix here, to me, pretty much confirms the Young Avengers are indeed happening, all the pieces are on the board, and Marvel will finally have a new speedster to build some pretty epic scenes around. Now, Frank Boner did return in that episode, and many of us want to see Evan Peters return as Quicksilver. I don't actually think that's going to happen again. I think that was just part of WandaVision, and although it really worked, clearly the character didn't have powers in last week's episode, so he is truly a multiverse variant, and although we may see him again in the future, I don't think he's going to be anything but comic relief moving forward. But we'll have to wait and see. Now, before you take off, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, ring that bell for all the updates, and make sure you get every notification, because we do daily Marvel and DC content, and we don't want you to miss any news.